welcome back everyone, it's me, Matt. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's been a while that we've talked about armoured fighting vehicles. I've been away doing all sorts of different things, and unfortunately today's video is not that of a positive news outlet. I have to break to you some interesting developments that are going on in the UK right now. Now, as many of you know, my channel is heavily focused upon armoured fighting vehicles, especially tanks, and I am of British descent and used to be in the British Army and have worked quite heavily with the main battle tank Challenger 2, Warrior, and basically any other tracked vehicle of the British Army. We're looking at the beautiful World War I tank of the day for the British Army, and it does bring a little bit of a tear to my eye watching footage like this because, you know, the true tank history comes from the British Army. Let's be pretty clear about that. And unfortunately today, it was announced a rather disheartening bit of news, and something that it's very difficult to either read into or to validate is actually going to happen or not going to happen. Today, as of August 25th, 2020, there was an announcement via the media of the British Army could be actually axing tanks, warriors, and other fighting vehicles in modernization plans. Yes, the British Army is actually considering getting rid of Challenger 2, Warrior, and some other platforms. Now, a lot of you are probably watching this thinking, it's never going to happen, that's ridiculous, look how much money they put into the tank. Recently they just discussed the Rheinmetall 130mm main battle tank. They spent a lot of money on that, blah blah blah. Well, let's just talk a little bit about what's going on with this development first, and then I'm going to speak a little bit about my opinion on this and exactly what I feel is actually going to or not going to happen. Firstly, though, I do have to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I am going to be reading from a news source, not exactly the best news source in the world, BBC News, in regards to this particular article that got released today as of the 25th of August 2020. It states the British Army could axe aging tanks as part of modernization plans. Now, I'm going to read it pretty much verbatim and put my little tidbits in there. Is the nation which invented the tank about to abandon it? The British Army's Challenger 2 is already old, quote. In 2019, the Defence Secretary at the time, Penny Mordaunt, went as far to suggest it was obsolete. She noted that the Challenger 2 had been in service without a major upgrade since 1998, unquote. May I add that that is completely wrong, and this article is already really upsetting me. Quote again, this is during the time in the US, Germany and Denmark had completed 2 major upgrades, while Russia had fielded 5 new variants of tanks with a 6th pending. Okay, that again really makes no sense as to the point of why we want to get rid of tanks then. Previous defense reviews have also seen tank numbers slashed from more than 500. Theoretically, the Army still has 227 Challenger 2 tanks, but in reality only about half of those are out of storage and ready to be deployed. Unfortunately, I cannot validate those numbers in that statement, but it seems pretty accurate considering I do know a lot of tanks are mothballed in storage containers, and some of them have been written off from cracked hulls to being blown up on tours, etc. The Army has been looking at a number of options to modernise its fleet of tanks for almost a decade, and that's very true. There are packages that are ongoing and actively can be installed on the Challenger 2. This is an interesting statement that they say here. This includes buying the German Leopard 2 tanks or modernising the Challenger 2 with a new turret and gun. Now, the Leopard 2 tanks is ridiculous to me, but modernising the Challenger 2 with a new turret and gun is something I will be discussing in a video in the near future with the Rheinmetall 130mm, which, by the way, looks absolutely bloody gorgeous on the Challenger 2. Quote again, but senior Army officers have also confirmed to the BBC, credibility of that is unconfirmed, that they've recently been considering whether they could do it without them altogether. While mothballing tanks could also be an option, there seems to be little point in storing old tanks unless they're for a museum. I have literally no understanding as to where this article is going with this kind of statement. A shift in thinking has been highlighted by the head of the Army, General Sir Mark Carleton Smith. In a recent speech, he suggested the threat of the tank was diminishing in modern warfare. The interesting point about that statement that I find just baffling, actually, is that most of the British Army deployments right now are in the eastern part of Estonia, Ukraine, etc., and most of those deployments involve heavily armoured battle groups. I really am not understanding the principle of removing armoured battle groups when the primary focus of deployments for the British Army right now is armoured battle groups. He also said, quote, "The main threat is less missiles and tanks. It's the weaponization of such elements of globalization that have made us prosperous and secure, such as the mobility of goods, people, data, and ideas," unquote. Defense chiefs have talked of investing in new sunrise capabilities such as cyber and electronic warfare and reducing sunset capabilities, without spelling out what that might include. Defense Secretary Ben Wallace has also underlined changes ahead. He has promised to invest more in the domains of space and cyber and new unmanned systems on land, sea and air. Without a significant rise in defense spending, that will require scrapping obsolete equipment to invest in new. Anyone who says that the Challenger 2 is obsolete equipment, I really need you to go take a look at what a Challenger 2 battle group can do in the face of another armoured battle group, because they're certainly not obsolete. They may be a little old and require some upgrades, but that is ongoing and has always been the case with Challenger 2 recently. It's just unfortunately no one has pulled the trigger to actually fully complete and do it. A combination of underinvestment, poor management, and long counterinsurgency campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan has left the army with a glut of aging equipment. It currently has 15 different types of armoured vehicle in service, with some close to the end of their life. Now, okay, that's a fair statement. You know, CVRT definitely does need to come off the showboat line, but we have AJAX. AJAX is coming in. It's taken a very long time, just like any new procurement of vehicles does, but things like that is inevitable. Okay, we're going to have vehicles that have that changeover, and it takes time. Challenger 2 is no different to that. It is our main battle tank fleet. Of course, it's going to take huge amounts of time and investment to change over, upgrade, or update the tanks. A program to modernize the Army's 700 Warrior armored fighting vehicles has suffered serious cost overruns and delays. Now, this is interesting news. I have heard this rumor a number of times across my table, and a lot of people have told me that there's been some quite considerable changes in the way in which they're going to move forward with the upgrades. Something we will talk about at another date, but remember, this isn't just focused on the Challenger 2. Warriors are very heavily focused in this change too, and as a massive advocate for Warrior, I think it would be the worst decision that the Army has made to get rid of both of these main armoured fighting vehicles of the fleets of Warrior and Challenger. It really just makes zero sense to me. I understand that there's cost overruns and delays, but the Warrior as a platform is absolutely outstanding, and I'm sure AJAX and other modern fighting vehicles that are out there today may put the Warrior up to its, paces, but it's still a good platform, a very good platform. The UK has also apparently failed to keep up with the advances in artillery, missile defense, and firepower. I would disagree with that also. The AS-90 still performs very well. It is a capable self-propelled gun. It is definitely not on par with some of the more modernized self-propelled guns, but again, if you're telling to remove an armored battle group and remove main battle tanks altogether and warriors, are you going to remove self-propelled guns then? Are you also going to remove rapier? What are you going to replace all these things with, if anything? Because by the sounds of this statement in this article, it seems like they may not be doing anything. Dr. Chat Wacklin of the Royal United Services Institute, a defense think tank, says it now faces a stark choice between modernizing its armor or prioritizing firepower and mobility. He says it cannot afford to do both, something that I would definitely agree with. Okay, you cannot update an entire armed force in the period of one slot. However, this is why I find it interesting that Challenger 2 and Warrior does have current upgrade packages ongoing. I really don't feel it would be necessary to upgrade the entire battle group, from artillery to engineers to main battle tanks to armoured infantry. It would just be too much. But the British Army has done pretty good in working on similar packages for each Warrior and for each Challenger platform to make them work. The thing that really is killing these things is there's no been true commitment to actually doing it. I've never seen a Challenger 2 that has had a full upgrade package across all platforms, across all squadrons, all regiments. It's just a concept for the most part. Now, Britain would not be the first country to abandon the tank. The Dutch army has given up all but its heavy armour, though it remains a small number of tanks and has soldiers embedded with German armoured units. Interesting statement there also. The US Marine Corps is also turning away from the tank as it focuses on mobility, and I recently did do a video on this, which is very disheartening, but it looks like this could be, unfortunately, some sort of rhetoric or, I guess, normality that we may be getting used to in the armed forces around the world, which is really scary to me. Moving tanks around the world, even Europe, requires considerable transport and logistical support, but in the case of America, the US Army will be investing in heavy armor. The reality is that despite of perceived changes in warfare, the main military powers are still investing heavily in heavy armour. Listen to that statement, let's read that again. The reality is that despite perceived changes in warfare, the main military powers are still investing heavily in heavy armour. So why is it that when the main armour that's being invested in around the world is being updated and upgraded and invested in, the UK is considering not doing that? I'm really confused as to what the counter to that will be. Michael Clark, a professor for defence studies at King's College London, notes, quote, "The emphasis on heavy metal of military forces is seen as old thinking in the era that is fast disappearing for everyone except the superpowers." Unquote. If the army did abandon the tank, then it would have to reassure its allies it would be investing elsewhere in defence. And that's a critical statement also. What are they going to put the money in if they're not putting on tanks? If we mothball all the warriors, all the main battle tanks, we have some AJAXs, a couple of the small tracked fighting vehicles, where does all that money go? One particular important ally might have major concerns. When aircraft carriers were abandoned in 2010, the then US Secretary of Defense Robert Gates concluded the UK was no longer a Tier 1 military power because it did not have full spectrum of capabilities using those aircraft carriers. Defense reviews inevitably lead to speculation about cuts to the armed forces and its equipment overall. The government has promised this time it will be different. I don't really ever listen to any government's promises, unfortunately. You know, things change. Governments change, people come in and out of office all the time, and it's a little scary to hear that this is coming across the table of the UK and the British Army. Downing Street has described the newly named Integrated Defence and Security Review as the most comprehensive policy review since the end of the Cold War. That's a pretty big review. Most of the equipment that is from the Cold War era is still being used by the British Army today, so it makes sense that they're doing a review, but I just don't think going across and taking out tanks upon tanks and armoured fighting vehicles is the way to go. But as with previous reviews, defence ministers and chiefs are still facing significant financial pressures and having to work out what they can afford. It's not just tanks that are being looked at, but the types and numbers of warships and aircraft and the overall size of the armed forces in general. Such speculation will intensify as the review draws to a conclusion later this autumn. In the end, the decision whether to scrap the tanks will be a political decision and unfortunately not a military one. Now, as many of you know, I'm not really allowed to talk about political statement or political input because I am a member of the Canadian Armed Forces actively serving and I don't have that ability to make my own opinion. However, I do have somewhat of a ability to speak my mind about, the UK's ability to use armour, and I think I'm an advocate for it, and I'm really just sharing my opinion of being upset and quite sad that this is something that's come across the table because I'm a huge advocate for heavy armour, for main battle tanks, and for any kind of tracked vehicles. I was a tank mechanic myself in the British Army. I've worked with every tracked fighting vehicle and just about every type of regiment or fighting force in the armoured world in the British Army. And now as a gunner in the artillery in the Canadian Armed Forces, unfortunately I don't see as much armour, but that's what reinforces even more so that I feel the need to have armour in armoured forces around the world. There's a couple of things that kind of, I guess, reassure me a little bit with this statement in this article, is that the British Army has been investing a lot of time and money into Challenger 2. If you haven't been paying attention to a lot of my videos or even videos that are currently out there, Challenger 2 does have some interesting upgrade packages out there. Of course, the Black Knight package is mainly a concept package that updates, its situational awareness and defensive countermeasures. It does nothing really to its overall main armament, the 120mm rifled gun, and some other changes with the power pack and such. The power pack, I can safely say, does require an upgrade. I will attest to that every day of the week. The Challenger 2 main battle tank engine and power pack transmission is just not able to keep up with the modern day standards that we're looking for main battle tanks, considering we're going up against some high powered gas turbine engines such as the Abrams that is getting some significant upgrades itself with the MTU power packs. Challenger 2 is just not quite there. Now, I have heard of some rumours of the upgrades being happening on the power packs, and there's some interesting developments, with Perkins, Cummins, or whatever else contract is going on with those engines. But that's all speculation and rumour. Again, I don't know the facts, and there's not enough information out there talking about that upgrade package. But the biggest development that really reassures me to hope that the Challenger 2 will stay around, and I can't speak too much for the Warrior right now, is the Rheinmetall 130mm main battle tank upgrade. Now, I will be doing a video on this more heavily in the future, but basically, Rheinmetall has made a concept main battle tank Challenger 2 with a 130mm smoothbore gun, which is a bit of a game changer because it literally changes the entire architecture of the turret of Challenger 2. Of course, there'll probably be some other major upgrades of the sighting system and targeting system within the Challenger 2 too, which is also fairly dated for its time. It would be interesting to make the perfect main battle tank in my eyes. A highly sophisticated Black Knight defensive package and situation awareness package placed upon a 130mm smoothbore, newly upgraded turret for Challenger 2. Pack that with a new power pack engine, and I promise you, you're looking at probably one of the greatest tanks in the world. There are definitely some features that the tank needs to get with the times and get with the program. When it comes to Warrior, I really can't speak a ton about it because I've heard a lot of background rumors about the 40mm upgrade package, the new turret system that's been placed on there, and again the power pack of the Warrior itself. I would say the Warrior is just about on par when I was leaving the British Army to be enough power to keep it running, but for things like Afghanistan where we up-armored them with bar armor and chobham, etc. in the high altitude of Afghanistan, they struggled. The power packs failed at a very high rate, and unfortunately they were just not up to the par and standards that you'd expect from a modern infantry fighting vehicle. The AJAX and, the Ares, which has just recently been released, some footage, a beautiful tracked fighting vehicle, is going to be a reconnaissance vehicle, is really, really nice. Armored reconnaissance is something that I think any armored battle group requires, but it seems a little crazy, and that's another reason why I'm a little bit more reassured is the AJAX and the Armored Reconnaissance Program has been bought. It's already been purchased. It's a brand new program. Millions upon millions of dollars have gone into AJAX. To provide AJAX with a job of being an armored reconnaissance unit, but then not having an armored fist behind it, seems a little crazy. If you're going to get rid of Challenger 2 and you're going to get rid of Warrior, what is AJAX's purpose? What is it armored reconnaissancing for? An infantry battle group? Jackals? It doesn't make a huge amount of sense. So I'm hoping that some of the big key financial and, commitments to upgrading the Challenger 2 and the Warrior will keep them in the spotlight. And I'm hoping the Defense Review will highlight that and see that these investments and these changes have been made for the positive change of the armored battle group for the British Army. I would love to hear your opinion on this, folks. I know there's a lot of people out there that are very upset with this news. All day, I've been getting instant messages and private messages from people telling me, yeah, this is crazy, why is this happening? And they're asking for my opinion, and I said, you know what? It ain't over until it's over. There's no one signed on the dotted line yet. It's a concept, it's a defense review. We go through this a lot. When the aircraft carriers were disbanded, it was heartbreaking. I really don't hope we go down that road again, but look at the positive side of this. We do now have the Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales beautiful aircraft carriers with a very sophisticated setup and the F-35 on board too. So, maybe disbanding of the Challenger 2 and the Warriors will open up a floodgate for a new main battle tank, and that's promising and a little exciting, but also scary because when it comes to something like that, it may be just as costly to buy new than it is to upgrade old. And if it's more costly to buy new and still costly to upgrade old, they might just get rid of them altogether. Anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave me a like and share your comments in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. It's a pretty big bit of news for the British Armed Forces for sure. If you enjoyed the video also and you want to support my channel, you can go check out my Patreon account. And if you want to be notified of any upcoming videos in the future, click the little bell by the subscribe button. And if you want to become a member of my channel and be getting some extra features, click the join button also so you can be notified and get some cool little perks and features. I hope to see you next time, folks. Check out the description box below for all the other links and bits and pieces for my social media, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.